Hey guys, welcome to this live session by Intellipaat. So basically in this webinar session, what we're going to look into is how to clear AWS Associate Certification in 2021. To be frank, there is not much difference from the 2020 or 2019 part of the AWS certifications to the 2021 part. There are only smaller differences and they're basically negligible because they are basically new topics which got added. That's it, new topics which got added and old topics which got removed. So you basically just have to look at the exam guide right now and learn what is over there. So before moving on with that, let's look at the agenda. Well, I'll just give you a brief of why you should take up AWS, because there are so many other certifications. There is GCP, there is Azure certifications. Yeah, so there are many cloud certifications. So why should you take up AWS? Then I'll also give you a brief about the steps to learn AWS, because whichever certification you take up, obviously you'll have to learn for it and then clear the certification. So I'll give you steps in which you can learn by yourself, and then we'll look at the certification path and we'll learn about the associate certifications. Once that is done, I'll basically introduce you to the free materials we have, which you can basically look into and start learning by yourself. And also at the end of the session, my colleague will be joining and they basically will be explaining you about the instructor-led trainings, and yeah, so you can basically understand more about it. And also if you have questions regarding your career, if you have questions regarding the certifications and which certification would be the best for you, which career role or job role would be the best for you, you can basically ask them and they'll answer it to you right then and there. So now let's get started. Okay, so first of all, why AWS? AWS has business in over 190 countries. So basically they don't have data centers in all 190 countries, but the access basically is given to 190 plus countries, and they have business in 190 plus countries. And currently they have more than 1 million active users. I am a user, so each individual and as company put together, they have more than 1 million active AWS users. Then AWS provides 170 plus cloud services. So they basically increase the number of services every single year. They make their existing services even better. They introduce new features. So that goes on every single month as well. And it goes on every single year as well. Okay, so these are some of the numbers which I wanted to tell you, because AWS is obviously the number one cloud provider right now. And it basically shows over here. So this is the Q3 of 2019, in which they had 39% of the global market share. Azure had 19%, Google Cloud had 9%. So it is still the same. AWS are still number one at the end of 2020, even after 1 year. Azure is in the same second place, and Google Cloud and Alibaba Cloud are actually a little bit closer, from like 8% and 7%. They're pretty closer. So I think Alibaba Cloud has a great chance of crossing Google Cloud this year if they are doing their job really well. If not, there is always that fight between Google Cloud and Alibaba Cloud. And if Alibaba Cloud comes to the third place, obviously you basically have four top choices then. You have AWS, Azure, Google, and Alibaba Cloud. Okay, so in the right side, you see there are multiple job portals. And basically I just checked at the solutions architect domain, and in the solutions architect domain alone, there are more than 7,500 jobs basically in all of these job portals. So right now you can go ahead and check it again, and you can basically find out how many jobs are available, what are the jobs that are expecting you from, and basically you can understand all the things you'll have to know, so that you can basically take up a certification, clear it, and figure out which role you want to go into and basically apply for it. And then one more reason, the top companies like Netflix, Salesforce, Pinterest, Reddit, Twitch, they are all using AWS. And basically when you are an expert in AWS, you can get a job in a startup, or even you can get a job in these companies. That is the top tier companies. You can basically get into them because obviously they're using AWS for their cloud needs. And if you have become a master in cloud, you can get into those companies. And the average salary of a solutions architect, the AWS solutions architect in India, according to Glassdoor, is $122,000 per annum in the USA and 7.3 lakhs per annum in India. So I wanted to give you all of these facts to just say that AWS is the number one cloud provider. If you take up the certification and get into a job role like solutions architect, you will get a great pay at the beginning itself. Also, AWS is the number one, as I already told you, and there are major companies using AWS. If you want to get into one of the major company, you can go through the cloud domain. So now coming to steps to learn AWS. First, learn the cloud and networking fundamentals. Cloud fundamentals in the sense, first learn about the cloud models, the service and the deployment models, where is cloud used, what are the use cases, what are the major companies who are into cloud. So all of these fundamentals, and then moving on to networking fundamentals, learn about IPs, CIDR notations, IP security, also about a little bit about encryption, symmetric, asymmetric encryptions. So learn about all this, just the fundamentals, because if you enter, also I forgot to mention one more important fundamental, which is virtualization. Learn virtualization as well. So when you know all of this, and basically before getting into cloud, it will be much easier for you to grasp what is going on over there. Because when you launch a server, it is basically a virtual machine running on a physical server in the AWS data center. So now if you don't have any idea, if you spin up a server, you will not exactly understand that mechanism at first. So while doing it or before doing it, basically understand what is going to happen and then move ahead with it. And then AWS services. Once you're done with the fundamentals, start off with the AWS services, go one by one. Let's say you start off with EC2 and go to EBS, EFS, RDS, DynamoDB, S3, Lambda, IAM. So go through the important services which are required. So I would suggest you to at least master these 5 top AWS services: EC2, S3, RDS, EBS, and the 5th one I can say EFS, or I can say DynamoDB. So let's say 6. So first master these. First master EC2, then S3, then EBS, then RDS, and then master, I would say, EFS. So master these 5 tools first and understand them clearly. Also, one more important service. So obviously while using EC2, you would get to know about it. So these 5 are important, and to make them basically to create an infrastructure of them together. Let's say you're creating an EC2 instance and creating an RDS database, and you want to basically retrieve information from the RDS database from the EC2 instance. So for that, they should be able to communicate between each other. So in that case, you would require a VPC, a virtual private cloud. So that is also an AWS service. So now EC2, S3, VPC, EBS, and S3. So sorry, EC2, S3, VPC, EBS, and RDS. So these are the top 5 services which you can go ahead. And then using the exam guide and white papers. So once you basically start learning AWS and you figure out which certification you want to give up, so basically you can provide 3 different associate certifications that we'll talk about later. So once you figure out which certification to give, then you can basically look into the white papers, the exam guide, take up practice quizzes. So this is basically the procedure, how you can do it. This is how I learned AWS. Okay, so now moving on. Now looking at the AWS certification path. Over here at the foundation, you have one certification, Cloud Practitioner. It is, let's say, completely a theoretical paper. You don't need to learn anything practically for this particular paper, but still, if you learn practically, you can clear this exam as well. It's basically the fundamentals of cloud, fundamentals of AWS. You should know the cloud fundamentals, the AWS fundamentals, and once if you know that clearly, you can basically clear this examination. But this cloud practitioner exam is not a prerequisite to the associate certifications or the professional certifications. So you can directly take up the associate certification. That's what I would recommend instead of taking the cloud practitioner. If you want, you can take up, but I would suggest you to directly go for the associate. So now in associate, there are 3: solutions architect, SysOps administrator, and developer. So solutions architect is the person who will basically design the cloud architecture. SysOps administrator is the person who basically administers the cloud, the servers running on it, databases, whatever it is. The SysOps admin basically monitors and maintains it. Developer cloud developer is a person who basically develops applications which are going to be hosted for or on a cloud infrastructure. So this developer should understand how cloud works and also know developing. And basically once you take up solutions architect associate, then you can move ahead with the professional certification, and then same thing goes with SysOps and developer. If you take them up, you can then go ahead with the DevOps engineer professional certification. And once you take up the associate, it's not that you should only go for professional. Let's say you take up SysOps admin and you get interested in one particular part, let's say advanced networking. So you want to get into you want to basically clear that certification and become a basically cloud network engineer. In that case, you can take up the advanced networking specialty certification and clear it and get into that job role. So now these are all the certifications which are provided by AWS, and right now let's concentrate on the three, which is associate, architect, operations, and developer. So these three we're going to look into right now. So let's start off with the AWS Certified Solutions Architect Associate. And before moving on with it, I just wanted to give you a brief about the examinations for these certifications. If you take up the cloud over here, if you take up the associate exam, it will cost you 150 USD. For the practice exam, it will cost you 20 USD. It's available in English, Japanese, Korean, and simplified Chinese. And then it is basically right now they're provided testing center. So actually right now, due to the pandemic, they are also available online. You can take the exam online as well. So you can either go to a testing center or you can take it online, and you will be given 130 minutes to complete the examination. Coming to a professional examination, pretty much the same, only the time differs, 170 minutes, and the cost would be 300 USD. Same languages, and the practice exam would be 40 USD. Now coming to the specialty certifications, it's basically the same as the professional certification, and all of these exams are multiple choice and multiple answer examinations. That is, there could be one answer or there could be multiple answers for the same question. So these are the different certifications available. As we are looking into the associate, let's first concentrate on that. So now, first, AWS Certified Solutions Architect. So what do they expect from you, or what is basically analyzed or looked into in the AWS Certified Solutions Architect exam? First, effectively demonstrate knowledge of how to architect and deploy secure and robust applications on AWS technologies. So you should know how to architect and deploy and complete infrastructure on AWS technologies. So you can see, effectively demonstrate the knowledge. So basically they'll be asking you questions regarding this and you should be able to answer it. Then define a solution using architectural design principles based on customer requirements. So they will ask you a question by providing certain requirements, and you should basically choose the appropriate solution for it in the answers or the options. So basically you should understand and analyze the customer's requirements, and you should be able to come up with an architecture which basically suffices all the customer's requirements, and also it is secure enough. Then provide implementation guidance based on best practices to the organization throughout the life cycle of the project. So while that customer's requirements, while you get it, and once the project starts, you should basically implement and try to implement best practices throughout the project while it is going on. So about that, you will be asked questions on that as well. So these are the three things which are being analyzed if you're a solutions architect, if you're going to take up the solutions architect exam. Now, to go into more depth and see what exactly is in the examination, first, domain 1. If you look at the left column, which is domain, those are the topics which are being or those are the major categories in which the questions will be coming ahead, and the right side is the percentage of examination. For example, the first one, design resilient architectures, is 30%. That basically means if there are 100 questions, 30 questions are of design resilient architectures. So this is vague, so I'll show you the exact topics or titles which you'll have to learn after this as well. So now, then design high performing architectures. First one is it should be reliable. It should not go down. It should not crash. It should be reliable. Second one is high performing architectures. Basically the site or the application which you're going to host on it should never be down. It should always be available for the users. Then secure applications and architectures. So the applications which you're hosting on the cloud infrastructure you created has to be secure. And then cost optimized architectures. That is, you should create an architecture which is basically cost optimized. which makes sure that the cost is the lowest possible for you. That is, it makes sure that the architecture which you created is the cheapest one possible, but also high performing, resilient, and secure. So this is the solutions architect part. So at the end, I'll be showing you all of the topics which you'll require to learn in solutions architect, and also SysOps admin, and also developer. Okay guys, a quick info: if you're looking for an end-to-end AWS certification training course for solutions architect, developer, or SysOps administrator, we at Intellipaat are providing every single one of them, and you can go to our website and check it out, or you can check out the description box right now. Thank you. Now continue with this session. Now looking at SysOps administrator, so these are the topics which you will be evaluated on. First, deploy, manage, and operate scalable, highly available, and fault-tolerant systems on AWS. So as a SysOps administrator, you should basically know how to deploy and manage certain AWS services, and those services are basically highly available services and fault-tolerant AWS systems. Second is implement and control the flow of data to and from AWS. So you should understand how data flow works coming into or going out of AWS, and you should basically control it by creating certain permissions and certain policies which only allows certain users who are authorized to upload data or download data. Then select the appropriate AWS service based on compute data or security requirements. That is, whenever your company is asking you to provide a certain service for a requirement they have provided, you should basically select the right one. It may be compute, data, or security, doesn't matter. You'll basically have to select the right tool, and you'll have to basically provide them which makes it secure, which is a highly available tool, and also cost optimized. And then identify appropriate use of AWS operational best practices. That is, your company's infrastructures are running, they are available right now, so you're the SysOps administrator, so you should constantly monitor them on how to make them better by using the best practices provided. It may be the AWS best practices or your own best practices, but it should make the architectures better. And then estimate AWS usage costs and identify operational cost control mechanisms. So you are the person basically should look into the usage costs of the AWS account. That is, what is the cost of the EC2 services which is being used, or the S3, RDS. So each and every service you can basically look at the cost, and you should basically identify certain measures and mechanisms to basically control that cost and how to bring it to the lowest possible. And then migrate on-premises workloads to AWS. That is, they might ask you to move certain applications or move certain data from their own on-premise data center or their own on-premise server into an AWS storage or AWS cloud server. So you should be able to do that. So these are the topics which you'll be evaluated on as a SysOps administrator. Now coming to the domain and percentage of examination, the top one is monitoring and reporting. So you'll be asked questions on monitoring tools and reporting tools. Then high availability, deployment and provision, storage and data management, security and compliance, networking, automation, and optimization. So you should basically cover a lot of domains in this case, but monitoring and reporting is the most important over here as a SysOps administrator, because you should monitor the AWS architectures every single day and basically create reports on how you can make it better and also how to reduce costs. But in this case, you can see it is completely architectures. You should basically able to build resilient, high performing, secure, and cost optimized architectures. Now moving on to the next one, which is certified developer. So now demonstrate an understanding of core AWS services, uses, and basic AWS architecture best practices. So now as a certified developer, you should be able to understand how AWS services work, and you should know the basic best practices and how to use those AWS services. Second one is demonstrate proficiency in developing, deploying, and debugging cloud-based applications using AWS. So you should know how to develop, basically how to code and how to create applications and how to deploy them on a cloud-based infrastructure. So these are the two things. One is you should understand AWS and the basic best practices. Second, you should know how to develop and deploy applications which are based for a cloud like AWS. Coming to the domains which you'll have to learn. So the top one is basically security. You can see, it's development with AWS services, which is the third domain. But in this case, you should know deployment, that is how to deploy AWS services, how to deploy your application onto AWS services. Second, security, because when you're hosting your application, you should make sure the AWS services are secure as well as your application is secure. Third is development with AWS services. So you should know AWS SDKs, APIs. You should know how to basically use AWS SDKs to create efficient code. So that is basically development with AWS services. Then refactoring, that basically means, let's say there is an architecture already available. If it does not suit your application, then you should be able to refactor it with putting in new services. Finally, monitoring and troubleshooting. For a developer, monitoring and troubleshooting is really important, because while monitoring, you'll understand what are the issues with your application, what needs to be changed, what are the bugs, and once you know them, you can basically troubleshoot it and clear them off. So these are the top 5 domains which you'll have to learn. So now, before moving on to the next part, let's open the website. Okay, so the first one is Certified Solutions Architect, SysOps Admin, and Certified Developer. Coming down, so these are the things I told you which will be expected from you. Now let me open the exam guide. So recommended AWS knowledge. So you can see they're asking you to have 1 year of hands-on experience. So our colleague who will be joining at the end of the session will tell you how to get that 1 year of hands-on experience. And in compute, networking, storage, and database, you should basically learn compute services, networking, storage, and database services. AWS deployment and management services. Coming down, AWS global infrastructure, that basically means you should understand how the data centers work, where are the data centers available, how you can basically use the availability zones for your advantage. Okay, so we've seen that. Now coming down, so you can see your results for the examination are reported as a score from 100 to 1000 with a minimum passing score of 720. So now if the score is 1000, then the minimum passing score is 720. You can get 100, 200 or 300 or something like that, but make sure you get more than 720, and I think you could easily pass. But thing is, it does not uses a compensatory scoring model, which means that you do not need to pass the individual sections, only the overall examination. So you don't need to pass each and every section. Let's say you are really good in cost optimized and secure applications and even high performing architectures. So let's say you answered most of them, and in resilient architectures you only answered half of them. You can still pass the exam because it's the whole. Okay, so over here they have provided you each and every domain's subtopics. So looking into the resilient architectures, you should be able to create a multi-tier architecture solution, that is from the front end, the middleware, and to the back end. So you should be able to create an application, an architecture which can handle an application which should basically host its front end, its code, and also connect it to a database. And then design highly available and fault tolerant architectures, design decoupling mechanisms, choose appropriate resilient storage. That is, you should basically choose the appropriate storage for your application, which basically is going to use S3. In S3, you should basically know which storage class to choose from. So like this, you can basically open up this exam guide and check out every single detail for solutions architect. So as we've seen this, over here, response types, multiple choice has 1 correct response and 3 incorrect responses. Multiple response, that is, it has 2 correct responses out of 5 response options. There are 2 things. Most questions will have 1 answer, and some questions will have 2 answers. So you'll have to basically figure it out. What is this? Yeah, your examination may include unscored items that are placed on the test to gather statistical information. These items are not identified on the form and do not affect your score. So you won't know this, but still you'll have to answer them. Yeah, so that's it about the examination. I think I've told you most about it. You should get a passing score of 720, but again, you will not be given that. You'll just have to score more than 720 overall. And these are the exam guidelines, and that's it. When you take it up, you should clear it. That's it. Okay, so we've seen this. Now coming to the next one. So basically you can see under every exam guide there are also sample questions. You can go ahead and check it. And here recommended AWS knowledge, 1 year of hands-on experience with AWS, managing and operating systems on AWS, AWS tenets, CLI, SDKs and APIs, security concepts with hands-on experiences, and how to implement security controls on AWS. So also you should know networking concepts like domain name server, TCP or IP, and firewalls. So as I told you, as a SysOps admin, you should know most of this, and everything else is the same. So the exam guidelines are the same. Coming down, now looking at this, monitoring, create and maintain metrics and alarms using AWS monitoring services. So there is a service called CloudWatch in AWS. So you should be a master in it. And then recognize and differentiate performance and availability metrics. Perform the steps necessary to remediate based on performance and availability metrics. Basically, you should monitor the AWS services which are running. You should set up certain alarms which will basically indicate you whenever something has been completed, or you'll have to look into a certain service, or if a certain threshold has exceeded. So this is basically for monitoring and reporting. You can basically look into each and every topic over here and understand what you need to do. Coming to certified developer, everything else is going to be the same, guys. Sorry, I came back to SysOps admin. So the exam guidelines is going to be the same. The recommended knowledge will change. See here, versus, yeah, you should at least have in-depth knowledge of at least one high-level programming language. So Java, Python, C++, whatever it is, you should at least have the knowledge of one particular high-level language. And you should understand AWS services and basic architecture best practices. You should know how, so this I already explained to you. Then you should know how to use APIs. Then you should know how to use the AWS CLI, and also how to use the AWS SDKs provided to you and write an application. Then understanding the AWS shared responsibility model, which basically tells you that if half of the responsibility is of AWS to keep the infrastructure secure, the other half is you, that is the application which you're creating, that should be secure enough to not let any unauthorized access into the AWS servers. And then you should know basically how to create a CI/CD pipeline to deploy applications. That means you should understand DevOps, and you should know the basic tools in DevOps. There are some DevOps tools in AWS also, like developer tools, code commit, code deploy, code pipeline. So you should know them. And then ability to use or interact with AWS services, AWS security best practices, writing code for serverless applications, and understanding the use of containers. So containers, again, you should know containers because right now most of the applications are taking up a microservices architecture. So I think it would help you if you know about containers, and everything else is going to be the same. Now coming down, so deployment, deploy written code in AWS using existing CI/CD pipelines, processes, and patterns. Deploy applications using Elastic Beanstalk. Prepare the application deployment package to be deployed to AWS. Deploy serverless applications. So you should basically understand everything about how to deploy your applications onto different AWS infrastructures. It can be an EC2 server, it can be an Elastic Beanstalk environment, it can be a serverless application in which you're using Lambda. So whatever it is, you should know how to deploy your application onto the AWS server. So this is basically is AWS certified developer. Okay, so these are the 3 things you'll have to start learning, guys. Now coming back to the PPT. So now further learning, that is an investment in knowledge always pays the best interest. So you can basically look into 2 different investments. One is your time and one is your money. So if you invest your time, you can basically look into all the free resources we provide, Intellipaat blog and our YouTube channel. And also if you haven't looked into our YouTube channel, or if you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe, guys, because we are basically uploading a video and we are doing a live every single day. And if you like or enjoy our content, also leave a like and subscribe to our channel. So now these 2 are our free materials which we have. You can just go ahead intellipaat.com/blog and you'll get a blog on every single topic: AI, ML, cloud, web dev, Node.js, whatever it is, you can get a blog on it, and basically you can start learning from there. In YouTube channel, we have videos on every single technology, you can go ahead and check it out. So these are the two things we are giving. And also we have our website in which you can basically take up online training, in which you can basically take up a live training from industry professionals who are currently working as a solutions architect or a cloud developer or a SysOps admin. You can basically learn from them. And if you want to learn from them, visit our website intellipaat.com, and you'll get to know more about that once I complete my part. So I've come to the end of my part, guys. You can basically contact us in these numbers at the top, India, and the second number you can contact from any other country, not just US. And then if you can also put up a mail at sales@intellipaat.com or open our website, and in the bottom right corner we have our course advisor. You can basically start chatting over there and get to know what you need, and we'll contact you immediately. So this is the end of my session.